Welcome to Business Now, your 20-minute getaway to trends, stories, strategies shaping the business world in Uganda and beyond. I'm Malcolm Sime, and in this episode, we bring you sharp insights into enterprise development. We delve into the latest from the Global Innovation Index and explore the current state of the grain industry, the key pillar of trade and food security in the region. We also break down movements in Uganda's equity and currency markets, offering clarity in a complex economic landscape, all in just over 20 minutes. Local focus, global perspectives. This is Business Now. Let's dive in.
So accessing cheap money is not an automatic gateway to wealth. It is simply an invitation to the wealth table.
The mitigating factors under normal circumstances would be buying out all the grain, stabilizing it, storing it in good condition, and then releasing it to the public at prices that are controllable.
We are performing better on the ground than we are performing on paper in the index because of data.
But first, let's have a look at today's top business stories. Food prices spike amid inflationary pressures, and according to the Bank of Uganda's May 2025 monetary policy statement, both headline inflation and core inflation rose 3.9 and 3.4 respectively, remaining below the medium-term target of 5%. On May 15th, the Uganda Parliament approved the government's proposed budget of 72.4 trillion shillings and approximately $20 billion for the 2025-2026 fiscal year, maintaining similar spending levels as the current fiscal year. Despite a temporary pause in tariff hikes between the US and China, US consumer sentiments have declined to 50.8 points in May, from 52.2 points in April, driven by fears of rising inflation due to President Trump's trade tariffs. Let's now dive into the CEO segment this week. Uganda's entrepreneurs are full of drive, but to date, that drive is meeting resistance. From tight credit and outdated infrastructure to digital gaps and regulatory roadblocks, this path to business growth is anything but smooth. On Business Now, we break down what's holding back enterprise and what it will take to unlock the full potential. Charles Ocici is the Executive Director of Enterprise Uganda.
When we started Enterprise Uganda, we used to train 30 entrepreneurs every 3 months. That's a total of 120 in a year. Over the last 24 years, we've now done a global picture of 220,000, meaning that today our scale is no longer 120 per year. We are reaching over 20,000 per year. Now, numbers like those may feel like, well, this is progress, but it's much more important to see what is behind the numbers. In other words, have people transformed? Have people become better? Are people now market leaders? My message is this. Over those years, Enterprise Uganda has been able to touch the lives of young people, women, people who were displaced in northern Uganda, and many of them have got stories that you would never imagine could actually emerge out of the intervention of Enterprise Uganda. It is possible to transform this country with the limited resources, properly directed to empower the community to scale from wherever you find them to a level where they can begin to compete on their own merit with whoever comes into the marketplace, because only then and only then can you sustain wealth with the local population. It cannot be done by just imposition or by just giving handouts. They must sweat for it. So that's the sort of Enterprise Uganda. And we believe as we enter 2026, when we shall be launching the biggest center in Africa for enterprise development, what we have done can only become better. We have got a center today that has got capacity to seat 1,200 learners at a go. We have another part in that facility where we can seat 200 people in an amphitheater, where now you can have classy setup for people from NSSF who are going to pick their retirement money, and before they waste it, they come for training at Enterprise Uganda. At that facility as well, we shall be getting to people who are benefiting from this huge investment of government in UDB, where over 1 trillion shillings has been availed for people to access credit at a cheap rate of 12%. But it's not about the cheapness on the access or the access of that money. It's ability to get that money, invest it properly, and go and compete in the private sector. So accessing cheap money is not an automatic gateway to wealth. It is simply an invitation to the wealth table. And for you to remain on that wealth table, you must show your sweat and your ability to compete.
The Grain Council of Uganda hosted a national summit at Unite Millers, spotlight new technologies and push for industry self-regulation, from financing to power tariffs and grain standards. We bring you the key highlights and our conversation with the Executive Director of the Uganda Grain Council, Henry Kasumba Musisi.
Working together with UNBS, the Grain Council has been at the forefront of the anti-aflatoxin messaging that is taking place. We've been central, we've particularly sponsored anti-aflatoxin or aflatoxin mitigation messaging, working together with our partners, one of whom has been UNBS. Many of these messages have been sponsored by our lead partner up there, AGRA. We've been at the forefront of activities towards the commercialization of an anti-aflatoxin mitigant called AflaSafe, working together with IITA, the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, if I'm not mistaken. We are encouraging our members to acquire the standard for stored grain, to make sure that their warehouses meet minimum standards as stipulated by UNBS. There's a standard for warehouses, and we are encouraging our members to acquire that standard also. Many of them already have. Grain in Uganda is produced in 2 seasons. Well, there's a first season that is harvested in January, and the second season which is harvested in July. In between those 2 seasons, prices inevitably go up and they drop during the periods of abundance, and they keep on rising. If I were to just give you an example today, maize, which started in the area of about 800 shillings at the beginning of the season in January, today I think is selling for 1,550. Now, the mitigating factors under normal circumstances would be buying out all the grain, stabilizing it, storing it in good condition, and then releasing it to the public at prices that are controllable, okay, that are manageable. Unfortunately, this maize is not bought that way. Private members, such as private sector, such as members of the Grain Council, buy off whatever they can buy with the resources that they have. Resources being finance, resources being the size of storage that they have, okay, and store that to ensure that there's good grain supplied to the milling sector and to the general public throughout. But it is not all. There's a lot of the grain actually does not come into proper storage. Probably 80% of what is exported, especially grain, is not captured, okay? Much of it, most of it, the greater bulk of it goes into Kenya. But the capturing of those stats is what you see in UBOS, because I think they get those figures from URA. Because of the fact that it is not taxed, nobody is interested in doing what? In capturing those figures. We know that we probably export at least anywhere between 800,000 and 1 million tons of maize through all our borders, the bulk of which 60 to 70% goes to Kenya as grain. The other export of flour, the bulk of our export of flour goes to South Sudan and the Eastern DRC and Rwanda, Burundi, okay? Kenya does not export flour because they have a very powerful milling community, and the kind of flour that they have, that they consume, is very different from the kind of flour that we consume here. Biggest market for that grain is Uganda's millers. Like we said, our very, very rough and rudimentary count using our means as a Grain Council, it informed us that the milling sector alone consumes in the area of 3.5 million tons every year over 2 seasons. Now, when we talk about grain, we are mainly talking about maize, because maize predominates. It's the biggest single grain produced in the country. So the biggest market for Uganda's maize is Kenya, export market. The biggest export market for Uganda's flour is South Sudan.
On Take Now this week, Uganda hosted the National Forum spotlighting the latest Global Innovation Index, where the country shows promise but still ranks low. We sat down with the Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Musenero, to unpack what the index means for Uganda's innovation journey.
The Global Innovation Index measures 7 pillars. 7 pillars. There are 7 different aspects. So Chira Motors and all those things which are ranked under the technology and innovation, Uganda is doing very well, which to me is really very good, because we have really worked hard on that. And it reflects the kind of effort that we have made, the kind of standard. We actually were very above the African average.
One will say, why do we now look like we are performing better in outputs than the inputs? What would you say? What would you rather say? Are we performing better in inputs or outputs?
We are performing better in outputs than in inputs. Actually, we are performing better on the ground than we are performing on paper in the index because of data. So we have been a bit more aggressive in putting the data which is on the outputs. So that data is more reflective of where Uganda is. That's why we are doing quite well, and it is reported that we are really doing well. And so we want to correct the data anomalies. Once we've corrected the data anomalies, Uganda is really doing very well.
If you look at our performance and look at the curve, are we going up? Are we stagnant? Are we? What does it look like compared to for the other years?
Compared to the other years, at first we were going up, then we sort of came down, but that's tricky to interpret because the indicators which they measure keep changing. They keep changing because the world is evolving. What is seen as good business, they keep changing. But also we performed badly because there were indicators why we look like we're going down, because there are some indicators where the data was outdated. We had the institutions which are supposed to collect and submit had not yet done that. And that's why we are meeting and we are making sure that these indicators are updated. In the future ones, my projection is we are just going to go very, very fast up.
What is being done to improve those areas? I mean, let's talk about research and development, and which I know you've really been talking about religiously. What have you been advising policymakers to do so that we beat those loopholes, at least in the long term?
Thank you. There are 2 aspects that we are addressing. The first one is the fragmentation in the ecosystem. Because to get the GII, you were collecting information from many different institutions. We had 37 institutions meeting, but we actually realized that we omitted 3. So we are about 40 different institutions that contribute, because science, technology, and innovation is not developed by one institution, but the performance of many. So this fragmentation is one of the things that we are trying to solve, because if I am trying to collect an indicator And I know that that indicator is very important. But then the one who is collecting that information does not know that it is important. They may not put a lot of emphasis on it. So we are actually working, and we have started to work on that. The symposium is the first step that we have taken to make sure that everybody knows what they are supposed to do. And we've done a great job building that network and even building the institutions, building the universities to make sure they understand what we are supposed to do, research organizations, but also the institutions which are collecting information like UBOS, also institutions like Bank of Uganda, although they are doing the other thing, but they also have information they are collecting, and also linking ourselves to the international agencies which actually submit this information.
Do you see high quality innovation outputs
yes.
beginning to come out?
Yes.
And what are you doing, you and your ministry, to make sure that at the end of the day, because we have strength, the knowledge, and on technology outputs, we have that knowledge. What about the quality that is coming out? What is the report card showing?
The report card is showing us, to put it in the words of one American very high level person who came to see us, he said Uganda is at the cusp of something great. And he said Uganda is likely going to be the next South Korea. And I've had these comments over and over when people come, because we've been reaching out internationally to people who have the expertise, who have done what we do. And when they come around, we take them, and you need to see their faces. Wow, you mean you're doing this? You mean you're doing this? The second part of the report card are the number of companies, international companies that have started coming around. There is a piece we call the IoT, which can be a remote control. The one which controls the pumping, and they have chosen to come and manufacture from here. That, for me, is a vote of confidence. The number of investors has been increasing rapidly to come and invest in these innovations. So we have built those bridges, and the report card so far, having poured my life into this, I must say I'm very satisfied.
You must be very proud of that then.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so just my last, least but not least, let's speak about the flows, capital flows into the area of R&D, research and development and all the other things. Are we seeing, the appetite for those investors that you're talking about? And what do the numbers say, like in the last few years? What have we seen coming through in terms of capital inflows to support those ventures, at least of startups which are locally based?
Yes, that is part of the report card. A vote of confidence. People vote with their dollars. If you are doing something good, if you are doing something attractive, we have been able over the past, especially between 2023 2024, because that's when we reached a point where people could see what we are doing, and we have brought in about 800,000 US dollars in just the mobility, just that, only that. I don't have the other figures offline, but mobility we brought in $800,000 as investors in the different innovations in the mobility.
The Uganda shilling is expected to maintain its current stability against the US dollar in the upcoming week, but factors such as limited demand, steady export inflows, and the Bank of Uganda's monetary policies are likely to support this trend. However, market participants should remain attentive to any changes in global economic conditions or domestic factors that could influence the exchange rate, according to experts. Meanwhile, in equity markets, the week starting today, 19th May 2025, presents a cautiously optimistic environment for East African equity markets, and the latest will be in as we get the numbers. That's all for today's edition of NTV's Business Now. Join me next week as we dive deep into Uganda's monumental 72 trillion shillings budget for the financial year 25-26, and with the other key business insights driving the country's economic growth. Catch the show every Monday, 8:30 p.m. live on X and our website on ntv.co.ug and here on NTV Uganda. Missed it live? No worries, you can always catch the replay on our YouTube channel and follow the conversation live on X and all other social media platforms. Abako Msime, thanks for watching and see you next week.